Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. When I married Matthew, I knew that becoming a stepmother would be a challenge. He had a daughter, Lila, from his first marriage, and though she was a teenager, I was prepared to navigate the complexities of blending families. She was 14 when we met, and by the time we were married, she was 16. From the beginning, Matthew and I made it clear to her that we expected respect, open communication, and boundaries. I had no illusions about the difficulties ahead. Lila had already experienced the emotional strain of her parents, divorce, and was still grappling with the absence of her mother in her life. Matthew, being a loving father, had always tried to make up for that absence, but he wasn't prepared to raise a teenager alone. And so, when I came into the picture, things were already tense. But what I wasn't prepared for was the insidious way Lila would try to break down our family unit, and how her behavior would slowly begin to unravel. Everything I had worked hard to build out at first, things seemed relatively fine. Lila and I didn't bond immediately, but we were civil. I respected her space, and she respected mine. Matthew and I had agreed that we would avoid being too parental toward her, as she had already gone through enough upheaval. Our role was simple: mutual respect, clear boundaries, and open communication. However, the first signs of trouble began when Matthew and I went on a weekend getaway to celebrate our anniversary. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, hoping for some much-needed time alone. But when we returned home, we found things out of place. A few of Matthew's expensive bottles of wine were missing from the cellar, and there was an unfamiliar scent lingering in the air, a mix of perfume and something else I couldn't quite place at first. I brushed it off as nothing. But something nagged at me. When I asked Lila what had been going on, she was evasive. She claimed she had been at a friend's house the entire time. I didn't want to push too hard after all, she was 16, and I didn't want to come off as the overbearing stepmother. But the seed of doubt was planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes. Lila, once a quiet and private girl, began staying out late more often. She'd come home smelling like cigarette smoke, her eyes a little too wide and alert, as if she was hiding something. I asked Matthew if he had noticed, but he assured me it was just her rebellious phase. I wanted to trust him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the evening that shattered everything. I was working late one night, finishing up a report for my job when I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message was cryptic, just a link to a video. My curiosity got the best of me, so I clicked on it. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a video of Lila. She was in our house, sitting on the couch with a boy I didn't recognize. They were talking, laughing. Then the camera zoomed in. My heart sank as I saw Lila kiss the boy, her hands moving in a way that left no doubt about what was going on. Felt a lump form in my throat as I realized what had happened. It wasn't just that Lila had violated my boundaries, but she had done so in a way that was deceitful and manipulative. She had invited someone into our home, someone Matthew and I didn't know, and they had used our space for something intimate. The worst part? The boy was someone I recognized. He was a 22-year-old college student, someone I met briefly at one of Matthew's work events a few months prior. He was a family friend, someone I trusted, and I had no idea that he would be using our house. For such reckless behavior, I immediately confronted Lila. She was defiant, dismissing the video as something stupid and claiming it was a mistake. But I could see the manipulation in her eyes, the way she tried to shift the blame onto me. She claimed that she never asked for my permission, that it wasn't my place to dictate what she did in her own home. But the fact was, this was our home, and we had made clear what the expectations were. Matthew came home to the scene, and I could barely contain my anger. I showed him the video, and the look on his face was one of disbelief. But then, as if to add salt to the wound, Lila's expression changed. She grew defensive and angry, accusing me of overreacting. She said I was trying to ruin her life, that I didn't understand her needs. It was as if everything we had built, Every boundary, every attempt at respect was meaningless to her. Matthew tried to stay calm, but the damage had already been done. I felt betrayed not just by Lila, but by Matthew as well. He had always told me that our family was a team, but in that moment, I realized that the boundaries we set together meant nothing if he wasn't willing to back me up. Lila had shattered not just the rules of our home, but also the trust that we had tried so hard to establish. The aftermath was a blur. Matthew and I had long, painful discussions about what had happened. We agreed that Lila's behavior was unacceptable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Matthew was still trying to protect her. He didn't want to see his daughter as the person she had become: rebellious, deceitful, and disrespectful. For weeks, things were tense. Lila continued to defy our rules, and I began to feel more like an outsider in my own home. Matthew and I fought more than ever before. I had set clear boundaries, and yet no matter how hard I tried to hold on to them, it felt as if they were being erased, piece by piece. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had invested so much in this relationship, but at what cost? My self-respect? My peace of mind? I felt like I was losing myself in the chaos of trying to make everything work, only to see the very person I cared about the most, Matthew, continue to protect his daughter at all costs. The final straw came when Matthew chose to side with Lila during one of our arguments. He told me that I needed to understand that she'd been through a lot in her life, and I needed to be more patient with her. I couldn't help but feel that my boundaries, my values, were secondary to Lila's whims. We are still together, but our relationship is fragile. Lila is still living with us, and though we've tried therapy and family counseling, the damage is done. I never thought that setting clear boundaries could lead to such destruction. But in the end, it was not just about boundaries. It was about the values we hold dear, the trust we build, and the relationships we prioritize. I set clear boundaries. But in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way, my stepdaughter shattered them. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to keep my balance in a family dynamic that was now filled with cracks and instability. Every conversation with Matthew felt like a tug of war between loyalty to his daughter and his commitment to me. The more I pushed for clarity and accountability, the more Matthew seemed to retreat into a shell of guilt, unwilling to fully confront the truth of what had happened. Our home, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating. The trust we had built together as a couple seemed to evaporate with every passing day. Every small thing Lila did, from sneaking out late to bringing strangers into our home, felt like another layer of betrayal. What had once been a minor infraction now felt like a full-fledged assault on the boundaries I had so carefully set. One evening, when Matthew was away for a business trip, I'd hoped for a reprieve from the tension. It was a rare moment when I felt like I could breathe without the constant fear of conflict hanging in the air. But as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Lila came downstairs and began to engage me in a conversation that caught me off guard. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice unusually calm, though there was an underlying sharpness that I couldn't ignore. I nodded, bracing myself for another confrontation. I was prepared to hear more excuses or maybe some justification for her actions, but what came out of her mouth left me speechless. "I know you don't like me. You never have," she said, her eyes fixed on me with a sense of cold calculation. "You never wanted to be my stepmom. You just wanted to be Matthew's wife. And now you're just using him as a shield to protect yourself from all the mistakes you made." I was taken aback by the venom in her words. "Lila, that's not true," I said, trying to remain calm. "I've always tried to be patient with you, to give you space. But what you did, it wasn't just about me. It was about respect for your father, for our family, and for the rules that we set together." She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Rules?" she said, as if the word itself was a joke. "You think I need your rules? You think I care about boundaries? You don't even know me. You never have." I felt a pang of hurt at her words, but more than that, I was angry. This wasn't the daughter I had hoped to build a relationship with. This wasn't the teenager I'd envisioned supporting through the ups and downs of adolescence. The anger built inside me, not just at her, but at the entire situation. I had invested so much into this family, tried so hard to be the supportive, loving figure, only to be met with disdain and manipulation. "Lila, this isn't about me," I said, my voice steady but firm. "This is about the fact that you crossed a line. You violated the trust that was given to you in this home. This is about us as a family trying to respect one another and communicate honestly. But you've chosen to do the opposite. You've chosen to lie, to deceive, and to manipulate." She looked at me then, her expression hardening, her arms crossed in defiance. "And you think I'm the problem?" She sneered. "I'm just a teenager who's been abandoned by my mother, and now I have to deal with you telling me what to do. You have no idea what it's like to be me." I could see the raw pain in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. But then the bitterness crept back. I realized she wasn't just angry at me. She was angry at the world, at her situation. But that didn't justify her actions, nor did it make them easier to accept. "None of this excuses what you've done," I said softly, my voice tinged with sadness. "We've all been through tough things, Lila, but it doesn't give you the right to destroy what we're trying to build here. You can't just push everyone away and expect everything to stay intact." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and stormed off, her footsteps echoing through the hall. I stood there, feeling defeated and hollow, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. It wasn't just the broken boundaries that I couldn't move past, it was the realization that there was so much more going on beneath the surface. Lila's rebellion wasn't just a teenage phase. It was a deep-rooted cry for attention and understanding, one that I wasn't sure how to handle. That night, I stayed up long after everyone had gone to bed, lost in my thoughts. What were we supposed to do next? Matthew had been so blinded by his guilt and love for his daughter that he had allowed her behavior to continue unchecked. But how could I keep living in a house where my boundaries were disregarded, where trust had been shattered, and where I felt like an outsider in my own home? The following day, Matthew returned from his trip, and as we sat down to talk, I knew that we couldn't continue this way. I had to make a decision for the sake of my own well-being and peace of mind. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about us as a family, and whether or not we could rebuild what had been broken. "Matthew, I can't keep pretending that everything is fine," I said, my voice wavering slightly but firm. "Lila's behavior is getting worse, and it's tearing you apart. I can't live in a house where my boundaries are constantly crossed, and where you continue to choose her over our relationship. I love you, but I don't know how to fix this if you're not willing to fully confront it." Matthew's face fell. I could see the guilt and confusion written all over him. He didn't want to believe that his daughter was the source of the problem, but deep down, he knew I was right. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice heavy with frustration. "I feel torn between you and her. She's my daughter, and I don't want to lose her. But I don't want to lose you either." And in that moment, I realized the brutal truth. Matthew was caught in the middle, unable to make a decision, afraid of what might happen if he took a stand. And I was left in a situation where I had to decide whether or not I could continue fighting for a family that seemed so determined to implode. Days turned into weeks. And as the tension mounted, I realized that nothing was going to change unless we both acknowledged the gravity of the situation. But could we really move forward? Could Matthew truly choose between his daughter and me? And if I stayed, would I be setting myself up for more heartache, more broken boundaries, and more emotional turmoil? I didn't know the answer yet, but one thing was clear. The person I had been, the woman who once believed that love and patience could heal all wounds, was now faced with a harsh reality. And no matter how much I wanted to fix everything, there were forces beyond my control forces I couldn't ignore. No matter how much I loved Matthew or how much I wanted to be a part of this family. As for Lila, I knew she wasn't just a rebellious teenager. She was a product of her past, a past filled with abandonment, betrayal, and heartache. But that didn't make her actions any less hurtful. I tried to be the steady hand in her life, But I was beginning to wonder if I'd overestimated my ability to heal the wounds of a family already fractured beyond repair. In the end, I realized that setting boundaries was important, but enforcing them was even more crucial. It wasn't just about setting limits, it was about holding firm, even when the storm raged around you. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, the storm becomes too much to weather. And in that moment, you have to decide if you can keep standing or if it's time to walk away. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in our home was palpable. Matthew and I drifted further apart, the emotional distance growing with each passing argument. He couldn't see what I was seeing, the manipulation, the defiance in Lila's actions. He was still in denial about the depth of her behavior, perhaps because he felt responsible for her struggles. Perhaps because he didn't want to admit that his daughter's choices were starting to unravel everything he had worked so hard to rebuild after the divorce. The weight of the situation started to take its toll on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I couldn't sleep at night, my mind racing with thoughts of what had happened, what was still happening, and what would happen next. I had always believed that communication and trust were the foundation of any relationship, but those values felt like they were slipping away, piece by piece. The breaking point came when Lila began bringing the same boy back into our home again. I tried to confront her, but every time I did, she responded with cold indifference, as if she couldn't care less about the rules or the boundaries we had set. I felt like I was talking to a wall, but the real gut punch came when I realized that Matthew was now minimizing the issue. "I don't think you understand, Alina," Matthew said one evening after I'd again tried to express how uncomfortable and betrayed I felt by Lila's behavior. "She's struggling. I know you're trying your best, but you need to be more patient with her. She's my daughter, and she needs me more than ever." I had heard this argument before, but this time it stung deeper. Was I not struggling too? Had I not made every effort to understand Lila and help her through her pain? Had I not given my love, my energy, and my understanding to this family, only to be pushed aside as if my feelings were secondary? I stood there, staring at Matthew, the hurt I had been hiding for so long now bubbling to the surface. "I am patient," I said, my voice cracking. "But I'm not a doormat, Matthew. I can't keep putting up with Lila's behavior and pretending that everything is okay when it's not. She's pushing me away, and every time I try to protect our family, you side with her." Matthew's face flushed, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes, but it didn't last. His defense mechanisms kicked in, and before long, we were both back in the same cycle of blame and disappointment. The next few days were spent in silence, each of us retreating into our own worlds, avoiding one another whenever possible. But the cracks were no longer just in our relationship with Lila, they were now between Matthew and me as well. The distance was no longer something we could ignore. Our marriage, once a source of joy and security, now felt like a fragile thread, fraying with every argument, every unspoken word. One night, after Matthew had once again let Lila have her way, I couldn't hold it in any longer. The emotional weight I had been carrying of being ignored, dismissed, and disrespected had finally reached its breaking point. I had spent years trying to make this work, trying to help Matthew see the truth, but it seemed that my efforts were in vain. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I can't keep being a part of a family where my boundaries don't matter. I love you, Matthew, but I'm losing myself. I can't keep fighting for a family that doesn't want to fight for me. This is not just about Lila anymore. It's about us, about you and me. And right now, I don't know if I can keep pretending everything is okay." Matthew looked at me, his expression a mixture of shock, guilt, and confusion. I could see that the realization was hitting him, but I also knew that this was the point of no return. Once words like these were said, they couldn't be taken back. "Lila is my daughter," he said quietly, as though justifying his actions in his own mind. "She's always going to come first. I need to be there for her." "I know she's your daughter," I replied, my voice steady but my heart heavy. "But I'm your wife. I deserve to feel valued, respected, and loved. And right now, I don't feel any of those things. If you can't see that, then I don't know where we go from here. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence filled with unspoken truths, with the painful realization that the foundation we had built together was no longer strong enough to support us. Matthew tried to reach for me, but I pulled away. I needed space to breathe, to think, to process everything that had happened. I couldn't be the one holding everything together anymore. I had given everything I had, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. The following days were a blur of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and ultimately resignation. Matthew and I continued to live under the same roof, but it was as if we were strangers in the same space, walking around each other without really seeing one another. The house, which had once been a place of comfort and love, now felt like a battlefield. It wasn't long before I began seeking out therapy. I knew I needed guidance, a way to understand what was happening within me and within my relationship. The sessions helped me see something I hadn't wanted to acknowledge, the deep imbalance that had existed for a long time. I had allowed my own needs to be overlooked, convinced that love and patience would solve everything. But in doing so, I had neglected to recognize that I, too, was deserving of respect and understanding. The therapist helped me realize that I had been enabling unhealthy dynamics in our home. By constantly making excuses for Lila's behavior, by allowing Matthew to choose her over me time and time again, I had inadvertently become complicit in the cycle of dysfunction. The boundaries I had set were meant to protect us all, but by not enforcing them, I had allowed them to be trampled. One afternoon, a few weeks after that fateful conversation with Matthew, I decided to have one final conversation with him. It was clear that nothing was going to change unless we faced the hard truths together. "We need to make a decision, Matthew," I said softly, my heart pounding. "Either we face what's going on in this family and start making real changes, or we walk away from it altogether. I can't keep living in a situation that's slowly destroying me. And I don't think you can either." Matthew looked at me, his face etched with the weariness of the past few months. He was torn, his love for Lila battling with his love for me, but something in his eyes had shifted. There was a flicker of understanding, the beginning of recognition, that things could not continue as they were. "I'm sorry, Alina," he said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "I should have seen this sooner. I should have stood by you more." The sincerity in his voice gave me a moment of hope, but I knew that hope alone wouldn't be enough. The road ahead would be long, and the changes necessary for us to heal would not happen overnight. But for the first time in months, I felt like we had a chance to rebuild if we both committed to it. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer willing to let my boundaries be shattered. This time, I would fight for myself, for my relationship with Matthew, and for the family we had tried to create together. Whether or not Lila could ever respect that was still uncertain, but at least now I knew I had to prioritize my own self-respect above all else. And so the journey began anew, not as the woman I had been, blindly hoping for change, but as someone who had learned the painful but necessary lesson that boundaries, when broken, can never be truly rebuilt unless everyone in the family is willing to work for it.